instructions. It's not as
All right, good afternoon.
I mean, in all fairness.
So, yesterday, going over the notes that I saw and the discussion that I observed, I noticed that there were a lot of things lacking in the notes. So today, I'm going to model what each of the graphic organizers should look like so that you have a clear understanding on your next poem so that you know exactly what is expected. Okay? So we're going to go over each one with some depth. So I'm going to shut off the front lights. Okay. Give that a second to turn on. Alright, does everyone remember the poem that I read during the presentations that was the introduction to poetry? Yes. It was the one about the, I'll just pull it up. Okay, and I'll read it out loud. Okay. Okay, it was the Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins. And that is the poem I'm going to use for my example. So it reads, I ask them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, and my screen's black. There we go. I say drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Okay, so this is the poem I'm going to be using, and I'm going to do each role myself and be my own group today. Alright?
Yay.
But I invented a group member named Sally for a part of it. Okay? So for the reporter, remember the reporter goes first. And I saw a lot of good reports, but they're sort of general. And a lot of people said, he said this, or she said that, and I want it to be much more specific. So I'm going to say, for this poem, the narrator, okay, asks them, so I'm summarizing my poem, to look deeply at a poem in many ways. Okay? A reader should hold it up to the light, drop a mouse into a poem, water ski across its surface, and I go into more detail from there. Okay, so I'm just briefly describing initially what the poem says. And then there's a shift in the tone, so I'm going to explain that. So the poem then shifts the tone and says, normally, all anyone wants to do is tie, etc. Is tie the poem down and torture all the meaning out of it. Okay, so I noted what the poem's about. I noticed the tone shift. And then I'm also going to go above and beyond and write one more note, and I'm going to say that this poem is an extended metaphor. Everyone knows what a metaphor is? Yes, awesome. Dylan, what's a metaphor?
Metaphor is a comparison not using like or as.
Excellent. Good, alright. So, ... Okay, so I said this poem is an extended metaphor where a poem is described as many physical things that someone can investigate. That was my whole thought, but I won't write it all out for you. Okay, because as a reporter, your job is to walk us through the poem, and you are sort of the newspaper reporter, as it says at the very top. You are the newspaper reporter. It is your job to take us through the poem and indicate the most important pieces, which I've done here. Okay, is there any questions on the reporter?
Oh, yeah.
Alright, so next time I want to see much more detail on our reports. Alright, the next one I'm going to go over is the discussion leader roll sheet. Okay, the main problem I saw with this, with a lot of the notes yesterday, was I saw many "what do you think" questions. And those questions are totally fine, but in minimal numbers. I saw a couple sheets in all the periods that had only "what do you think" questions. So I want you guys to dig deeper. I want you to push yourselves to think of questions that are going to push your group members in turn to think more deeply about a poem. So for this poem, I did start out with a "what do you think" question. I said, why do you think that, or what do you think, there we go, the title means? Okay? The title of a poem is often a big clue as to the meaning or the theme of the poem. So questioning what the title might mean is a great question to start off with. Okay, but I didn't just include "what do you think the title of the poem means." I said, what is personified in the poem? Do we all know what personification is?
Yes.
Yes. Let's see, who do I want to pick on? Daniel, what does personification mean?
Is to give a non-living thing human characteristics.
Great definition. Perfect. Okay, so I talked about that because that does happen in our poem. He talks about how a poem is tied to a chair and tortured, which is a personification. Okay? And then I said, why does Collins use personification? Okay? And I said, what effect does it have on the ending of the poem? So I'm not just saying one question, letting it sit there. You can build questions. So what is personified? Why is it used? What effect does it have? Things like that. Okay, I also said, I used one of the sample question ideas, and I said, what emotions does this poem convey? Okay? So it's totally fine to use the sample question ideas, but I want to see some more diversity, not just opinion, not just what do you think. I know that you guys can think deeper about your poem, and I know you can think deeper about your questions. So I want you guys to push yourself when you do this. Okay, is there any questions about the discussion leader? Alright. The next one is the artist, okay? I saw a lot of good art. Not going to criticize you at all on that, but I am going to criticize you for not reading directions. So it says right on here, write a reflection that explains your graphic or connections with the image and the poetry. Okay, so I saw great art, did not see any reflections. 0. Okay, so I'm not going to take the time right now to draw something, but I drew something previously. Okay, this is my art for my poem. I drew a poetry maze. It says poetry.
Does it actually work?
It does. It's an actual maze.
That's pretty cool.
Yep. And then I drew a mouse. This little guy right here. That's a mouse. Oh,
What?
this little guy. That's a mouse. That's as creative as I'm going to get with it too. Okay, so I drew my image, okay, and then I explained it at the bottom. I don't know why we're having light issues over here. But I said, I drew a poetry maze and a mouse to show the metaphor described in the poem. This shows that it takes time and focus to find the finish line, or what a poem really means. Okay, so it can be brief, but you want to explain what you drew and how it connects back to the poem. Alright, but I did appreciate all the great artwork that came out of yesterday. Okay, questions about the reflections?
No.
Alright, glad I got one answer. Thank you, Pierce.
No problem.
Alright, the next one is the diction detective. Okay, so on this one, my main critique was lack of detail. Okay, I'm going to show one example that I got yesterday. Okay? And this one has good examples and the ideas from the poem, but then this section is where you're supposed to explain what you're connecting it to. So you're just supposed to circle whatever type of connection it is in the middle, and then you're supposed to explain the connection in these boxes.
Is this Bridge Builder?
Oh.
You said Diction Detective.
Sorry, I'm talking about Bridge Builder.
Like my worksheet did not look like that.
Yes.
I got the right one.
Thank you for correcting me. I am talking about Bridge Builder. Okay? So, more detail. That's the theme of today. So then, in my example, I'm going to use the... Oh my gosh. There we go. Bridge Builder. Okay? So for my poem, I'm going to use the phrase, feel the walls for a light switch. So I'll write that over here. Feel, wow. For a light switch, okay? And I'm going to say this is a text to self example. And my connection, I wrote a lengthy connection, but I'll paraphrase. Okay, so I said, it's a good connection to when you feel, wow, I cannot write today, lost, there we go. When you feel lost in a dark room, and then, at last, you find the light switch. And you see everything clearly. Okay? So, I compared that with, this is what can happen with poetry too. You have to put yourself in that dark room, feel around for a little bit, and then finally it dawns on you. Okay, so that was my connection to self. My other ideas from my own poem was the phrase, tie the poem to a chair. Don't mind my handwriting.
We don't.
Okay, thank you. And torture a confession. Okay, that's the other phrase I chose. Wow, I cannot spell. I-O-N. There we go. Okay, I connected this to the world, and I connected it to wartime. Everyone turns to drastic measures. When they don't immediately get what they want. When they don't get what they want. Okay? Want. With a T. Alright, so I can't spell, obviously, and talk at the same time, so my handwriting is very poor on this example. But does that make sense where you explain yourself? Yes?
The example you showed was mine, and I did that, but I explained it when we discussed it.
Okay. Good.
What
We weren't judging.
It's okay.
You have to explain yourself.
Alright. No. I totally understand, but I want to see it on paper. Only because I can't make it around to everyone's discussion. And so my proof that you are talking about these things is on paper. Okay? So that's the only reason I ask for really good details. And the more details you give me will make your discussion more valid and discussion-y. Longer, I guess, would be a better term for that. Okay, we're cutting that part out of my video for sure. Alright. The next one is the diction detective. The actual diction detective this time. Nope. Wow. There we go. Alright. So with this one, I saw, here's maybe I'll have an example. Nope, I do not. Okay. So with the diction detective, I didn't see any major issues, but I just want to go over this one because the handout is confusing, in my opinion. Okay, so the word, phrase, or line is where you copy in exactly what you are identifying. So for mine, I chose probe his way out. Okay, that was one of the lines, phrases that I chose. And the reason I chose it was because it was descriptive and powerful. Okay, so you can choose things that are powerful, funny, thought-provoking, surprising, or even confusing in the instructions. So I chose this one because I think it's a powerful phrase. And then in the why, the author chose it, is just where you make your best estimate to why you think they chose that phrase. So I think the author uses this phrase as a descriptive metaphor to compare ... Okay?
Okay.
So what I'm saying is sounding very repetitive, but you have to realize that all these rules are going to be done individually. So when you're discussing it, it'll be interesting to bring up the metaphor piece because you can say, oh, I believe the same thing. I found that this is a metaphor also, which will further your discussion. Okay? So yes, I am repeating myself in this variety of handouts, but you will be repetitive as a group, which means you'll be making connections as a group, which is a good thing. Okay? Moving right along. The last one I want to discuss, so that's all the rules. The last one I want to discuss is the discussion note-taking organizer. Okay? I like that you had a lot of successes, but I'm going to use this one as an example. Okay? I just want more specific work. Okay? So this one says that you could all hear each other, which is awesome. And then they just said, keep up the good work, pretty much. Okay? And this one, the last one was good. This is a good example. So everyone understands the text except the last paragraph, and their goal was look up the confusing parts. Okay, so this is a good example. These are not as good examples. Okay, so what I'm looking for on this one is more specific pieces. So I made up my group names as, talking about the reflection sheet, I made up my group members as Billy and Natalie, and this is what I wrote. Okay, so for the challenges on speaking, I wrote, Billy was very unclear when he was speaking, and the group was confused about what he was trying to say. And my goal was, Billy should be more specific and clear about his point on this poem. So I'm clear about the error, and I'm clear about the goal. Okay? You don't have to call people out like I did with Billy. Okay? But you can say a member of our group was unclear. Okay? I'm going to call out Natalie too. But it's not her fault this time. Okay, so on the listening portion, I said Natalie had to repeat herself 3 times because members of our group were not listening. Poor Natalie. No one listens to her. Alright? And my goal was members of the group should pay attention to whoever is speaking. I think that's a good goal.
That is a good goal.
Yep. Alright, so the last one is understanding, and I was just more specific. I said our group was confused about the following phrase. Blah, blah, blah. And my goal was we will read the poem more than once next time and research words we do not know. Okay? Is there any questions about this one?
No.
The reflection sheet. Okay? The last piece was the discussion note-taking. Okay, and same thing. I'm just looking for more detail. Okay, I'm going to keep repeating that over and over. Because I saw a lot of, not so much in this class, but in other classes, I saw a lot of, I agree. And they made a good point. Okay, I want to know what you really think. I like that you're agreeing with them or that you think they made a good point, but why? So, I said Sally said she believes many teachers do to poems what Billy Collins is writing about. So that was the interesting point made by Sally that I wrote down, that I liked. The support that Sally gave me for her point, so her evidence for her point, was that Sally told the story of a teacher who once analyzed a poem for 50 minutes. One poem, just talked it out, 50 minutes. Right? My thoughts, I said I agree with Sally because I also have had a teacher talk and analyze a poem to death. And that is true. I took a poetry class in college, and I had a professor who wrote his thesis paper on Emily Dickinson, and in the entire poetry class, we only studied Emily Dickinson and Robert Frost. And that man could talk about a Robert Frost poem for hours. One poem, 4 hours. So I definitely know how that feels. Okay? So, and that is a true story. I made up Sally, but my story was true.
But Natalie. And Billy.
And Natalie and Billy. I made
There's
them
always
up.
a Natalie and Billy.
Always. There's always somebody who's not listening and somebody who's not speaking clearly. Okay? One other note is that I just saw some names missing on your sheets in your folders, so make sure that you go through those and make sure everyone's name is on their sheet. Okay? The rest of the time today is for you to choose your second poem, choose your second roles, and work.
Are we just going down the list?
Alright.
I like that. I like that. Well,
So Sam, I guess you and me are just gonna like
we don't have to be grouped up right now.
tell me what you're
I just both think.
other people.
No. Other category.
Address this on the table.
Well, oh my gosh. Yes. Okay, now I can see it. Yeah.
So I was wrong yesterday.
Okay.
Do I need to get this signed off on?
Yeah, I'll just initial it, write accent at the top, and then yes. Here's your folder.
Look at how fancy that looks.
You have to do it in like really fast.
It's talking crap.
Alright. Initial time. Here you go.
And then should I staple it onto the other packet as well?
Yes, but we currently cannot find the stapler.
Okay, so I'll just like nest it in like an extra jar.
If anyone knows where the stapler is, I'd really like to find it. But it's a mystery.
So I was flipping around in the book and I found a poem by EdTPA and I think it's hilarious. It's called A Pact. I make a pact with you, Walt Whitman. I have detested you long enough. I come to you as a grown child who has had a pig-headed father. I'm old enough now to make friends. It was you that broke the new wood. Now is the time
Is
for
anyone's sweatshirt in
parting.
here?
We have one set of let there be conflict between us. So he's like, Walt Whitman, I hated you for a really long time, but now I see that we do the same stuff. So like, let's work together. So he's basically like, I hate you,
Yeah.
but I don't know, I dislike you less than I used to.
Now we're doing the storm.
I barely know.
Which poem have you chosen as number 2?
Storm.
Alright, oh, you got a list already.
Yep.
Yeah, we narrowed it down.
We have pictures.
So
I
whenever
don't-
you.
This one requires explanation.
Did you see Star
Okay.
Wars?
No.
Oh, well, he kind of looks like him.
Well, no, someone look at my picture of the other guy. Here. I'll look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who, did you Photoshop?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Ellen tried.
I mean, it suits.
I've
It
never
like
used
fits.
it.
It's pretty funny.
I'm very proud of it.
It's pretty good. Yeah. What are you looking at? Well, over there,
Oh, there's the
Austin was saying how Pearson sees Stevie from
But we should definitely make a t-shirt.
Wait,
I wanna be the art.
What's the show called?
Malcolm in the Middle.
Malcolm in the Middle.
Are you really telling this?
See, they kind of look similar.
I can see it.
Does that mean
Steve.
Where are you guys
someone
going?
can actually do that?
Just to go.
Where are you going? Just here.
Hey, video is a thing.
Here.
That's the only just walking around here. Cool.
most
Did
likely.
you guys check mine?
What are the other choices?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay.
What
This
do
one
you
might be a little different for visual.
I feel like I feel the need to change something.
I tried helping Davey. And we
Okay, I'll do bridge builder.
Let's break this up, guys.
I found it. Okay, yeah.
I can
Wait.
Storm, I think critical is talking about the priest packet.
He crashed over the tree. He cracked the light branch. The branch was white.